Welcome to the Newsome MMA podcast in association with MMA Play 365, giving you the edge in MMA betting. I'm your host as always, Newsome, with your co-host John, and tonight we're back once again to break down UFC on ESPN4 from San Antonio, Texas. John, how are you doing tonight, man?
How you doing? I'm very well, thank you, my friend. I'm really looking forward to breaking down this card. Not only is it a fantastic card on paper for a non-numbered pay-per-view card, it's also featuring the headliner, my man, Leon Rocky Edwards. So how could I not be looking forward to talking about it?
Yeah, it's actually got a lot of really good names on the card. Also matched up with some really good fights as well.
Definitely some real close fights.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. But just before we start, we've got a short announcement for the podcast moving forward. So due to the launch of MMA Play 365, we'll be changing things up a little. So we'll be removing the parlay piece segment and the dogfight segment as well. The reason for this is just for some fight cards, the parlay piece or the underdog may actually be an inclusion in the betting advice hub on the MMA Play 365 website. We've got a lot of paying subscribers, so moving forward, I just feel that it makes sense to make these relevant changes. But instead, on the podcast, we'll be featuring 5 fights on each fight card, which will now be named the Newsome MMA main card. These will be the 5 fights that we believe are the best fights, and therefore will make our alternate main card. The rest of the fights will be quick fired off at the end, and aptly named the Newsome MMA Prelims. And whilst we're on the topic of MMA Play 365, we're coming off an outstanding event last week. We did lose on Ricky Simone, but that was the sole loss on the night. We cashed on 5 underdogs: D. Randami, Emmett, Feely, Martinez, Van Buren. It's pretty unheard of cashing that many underdogs in one night, but I told everybody time and time again that the Sacramento card was insane from a betting perspective. And those subscribers of MMA Play 365 will have made a lot of money and likely paid off at least 1 full year of betting advice. Also for the fun gamblers, the 2-leg parlay, the 3-leg parlay both cashed too. So man, everybody was a winner with MMA Play 365 last weekend. Remember, it's only $198 for your first full year or $30 per month, which can be cancelled at any time. So sign up today and start making money. And with that said, let's break down some fights at UFC San Antonio. And the main event of the Newsome MMA main card is Rafael dos Anjos versus Leon Rocky Edwards. John, who have you got?
Yeah, as you can probably tell, I'm extremely looking forward to this fight. I can't wait to see how this goes down. I think it's duly deserved for Rocky, getting a fight against a top-ranked guy like RDA. Obviously, RDA, he's a high-level gatekeeper, in my opinion. I don't think he's ever going to be winning the belt at welterweight. I don't think he's at that level. I don't think he'll be able to defeat, unless he gets a very favourable matchup. I can't see that happening anytime soon with Kamaru Usman as the champion. But yeah, he's a real test for anyone trying to break into that top 3 or that top echelon of the division. So for Rocky to get this fight, first I think it's just deserves, given the fact that he's on a 7-fight win streak and he hasn't lost since he lost to the champion Usman back in 2015. And also it's a fantastic matchup stylistically as well. It's really interesting to see how this is going to play out. Now, obviously you've got RDA. He's an absolute veteran of the sport. He's been around a long time. Over the last few years, in particular, his striking's really come on. He's a fantastic striker. He's a good, solid wrestler, got good solid grappling. I mean, all the fundamentals are there for him to be a dangerous guy wherever the fight goes, and that's what makes him such this gatekeeper to the very top of the division. Because if you look at his record, unless you're fighting guys like Usman, guys like Colby Covington, both of those guys have that same sort of style, that grinding wrestling style that probably doesn't favour RDA, and that's probably his one main weakness. And then you look back when he was at lightweight and he's losing to Tony Ferguson, Eddie Alvarez and Khabib. I mean, then you're going back years, back to 2011 before he for his next defeat. So he only loses to the top guys. So it's going to be really interesting to see how this fight plays out. And I think, for me, RDA is going to be the aggressor in this fight. Leon Edwards is a very good counter striker. He's real strength in his striking. I mean, he's as you can see on his record, he doesn't possess a great amount of knockout wins or submission wins. I know he got that ground and pound finish over Peter Sabota 3 fights ago in the very last second. I know a couple of fights before that he got the rear naked choke over Albert Tumenov. A really good performance there against a very dangerous wrestler and grappler in Tumenov. But his striking, I think, is underrated and underappreciated just because of the fact that he is a fantastic counter striker. He reads distance really, really well. His in-fight adjustments and his in-fight reading of his opponent is really good. He stays long. He's hard to hit. I mean, I know Cerrone did catch him a couple of times. I know he got caught by a big bomb by Barberena, but when you look at other fights against dangerous strikers, Luque, again, Tumenov possesses some power, and he's relatively comfortable on the feet in those fights. He doesn't give anything away cheaply. He doesn't let you hit him easily. You have to really work to hit him, and you have to really get on the inside of him because he uses that distance and he uses that reach really well. One thing that surprised many people in the Gunnar Nelson fight didn't surprise me because obviously I've seen him train quite regularly. Is his wrestling, and I keep saying this time and time again, but when he lost to Kamaru Usman and he just got wrestled to death in their fight back in 2015, he put this massive emphasis on the fact that he's going to improve his wrestling tenfold and he's going to become one of the best wrestlers coming out of Europe. And I think he started to prove that in a lot of his fights. I mean, the Gunnar Nelson fight, he kind of went in there with the attitude of, I'm going to show people I could probably defend the takedowns and beat this guy on the feet, but I'm going to show people that I'm not afraid to go into my opponent's world. And not many people saw him before the fight going in there and thinking, I know I'm going to take down Gunnar Nelson. I'm going to stay in his guard and pin him down and have some top control and grind out the decision that way. And he was really unchallenged in that fight. I mean, I know he got taken down twice in the first minute. Apart from that, I think Gunnar Nelson only landed one of the takedown, all three of which, all two, the two at the start, Rocky got back to his feet very quickly. The final takedown, I think, was the one in the last round when that was the only precarious position of the fight. And maybe against a guy like Gunnar Nelson, if there was another minute or two on the clock, it could have been a bit more hairy for him, being in the bottom of full mount. But ultimately, for 14 of the 15 minutes of the fight, he was comfortable against a very dangerous grappling Gunnar Nelson and someone who's not a bad striker either. I know striking isn't his strong suit, but he's not a bad striker. And Leon made it look pretty easy against him. So it's going to be really interesting to see how this fight plays out because, like I said, I think RDA is going to be on the offensive. We've seen in his a lot of his fights, especially the Kevin Lee fight in the last fight, he's got very high output. Robbie Lawler fight again is another example. His output is very high. He mixes in his takedowns really well with his striking. I know he took Kevin Lee down a number of times. One thing I didn't like in that fight was Kevin Lee was kind of just standing in front of RDA and trying to go strike for strike with him, and I don't think Kevin Lee's on RDA's level when it comes to striking. I don't think Kevin Lee's on Leon Edwards' level as well when it comes to striking. So that's why he kind of got a bit pieced up and got hurt in some of the striking exchange. And he got caught with a couple of head kicks as well, which wobbled him. And then obviously RDA eventually finished it in the championship rounds in round 4, taking it to the mat again and locking on the arm triangle choke. But we did see Kevin Lee take RDA down. We've seen, obviously, I'm going to exclude the Usman and Covington fights for the takedowns and things, but we saw Tarek Safadine take RDA down. We saw Cerrone take him down. Then you're going back years and years, but Benson Henderson, Jason Hyde, these guys have all taken him down. I think Leon Edwards will be able to take him down, and I think he'll be able to take Leon Edwards down. So for me, this is a really, really close fight. And I know the betting lines are really close, and I've seen a lot of support for either guy on Twitter, that people making their justifications for both guys, which I can fully understand because I can see it being, I think it's going to go the distance. I don't think either guy is going to get finished. And I think it's going to be one of those where there's going to be some really close rounds in there where maybe each fighter gets a takedown, they each have a bit of top time, and then the rest of the round plays out on the feet. And it's one of those where it goes to which judge prefers which fighter's aggression and control. And for me, I'm going to stick with my boy Leon Rocky Edwards in this fight. I think he is going to win this fight. I think he's going to win a decision. As I said, I think that both guys will take each other down. I do think Leon will be able to take Dos Anjos down and have a bit of top time. I do think Dos Anjos will return the favour and take Leon down. But as we've seen, Leon can get back to his feet. RDA can get back to his feet. I think both of those guys will have some success, a little bit of top time, and then get back to their feet. And then it comes down to a striking battle. And as I mentioned, it's the intricate things about Leon Edwards' counter striking that I think is going to get him the win in this fight. I think Dos Anjos will be the aggressor. I think he'll be coming out with those combinations, mixing in the kicks as well. But I just think Leon Edwards is always going to be outside of that range. And as I said, his footwork and his distance management is really good. He reads things in the build-up to fights and in the fights really well. We saw that with the Gunnar Nelson, that big elbow he landed off the clinch. He'd seen that was a weakness, and he picks up on these things. He's got very, very good and very high fight IQ as well. And I just think that is going to see him through. I think he's going to be able to counter-strike well. I think he's going to be able to keep Dos Anjos at the end of his punches, and I think Dos Anjos is going to come marching forward quite often. Occasionally, I do think he'll land a couple of shots, a couple of combos, which will press Leon Edwards against the fence, and maybe that's where we'll see his takedowns come in. But the majority of the time, I think Leon Edwards is going to be able to slide out of reach and catch Dos Anjos with counter strikes. When Dos Anjos gets close, I think he's going to use those front kicks and maintain distance. And I do think it's going to be a really close fight. But I think my boy Leon Edwards is going to come out victorious, and then he's going to be staring down the barrel of a title shot anytime soon. So I'm going with Leon and Rocky Edwards to win this fight via decision.
It's a really interesting fight, man, and it's also a really good fight stylistically. But first and foremost, for Leon Edwards, this is a huge fight for his career, because up until a couple of weeks ago at UFC 239, RDA was actually ranked third. He's now ranked fourth. Obviously, Masvidal's leapfrogged him with his latest antics, knocking out Till, and then obviously Ben Askren. But this is still a top, RDA's ranked 4, so this is still a top 5 fight for Leon Edwards. And if he wins this, he will become a top 5 fighter in the UFC welterweight division, which, like I said, this is huge. This is a massive, massive opportunity for Leon Edwards. He's on a 7-fight win streak. Like you already mentioned, John, the fight before that was the loss to Kamaru Usman, who is now the champion. And to be honest with you, I see him being the champion between him and Colby anyway, at least for years to come.
Can I just add, sorry to interrupt you there, I also forgot to add that if you look back on that fight, I know obviously it was many years ago, but Leon Edwards probably put up the best fight against Kamaru Usman that I've seen. There may be one or two guys that I'm off the top of my head I can't think, but he took a round off Usman, and he actually fared pretty well in that fight for a guy who at the time really wrestling wasn't his strong suit. His takedown defense wasn't great, and I know, like I say, it's going back several years, and guys have evolved, and Usman's evolved, Leon's evolved, but he actually put up a pretty good fight against the now champion in comparison to some of the guys that we've seen Usman come up against.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see if they take that rematch in the future. Obviously, depending on where Leon goes, if he wins this fight and a couple of others, and he potentially gets that title shot, because I do see Usman being the champion for quite a while, and obviously they'll have both improved by then as well. So it'll be really interesting to see how they would match up in the future for sure. But like I say, this is a huge fight for Leon, and this is one that I really don't think he should be taking lightly, which I assume, and I'm sure that he's not, but he's got to do the right things in this fight. And what I mean by that, and one of my main worries for Edwards in this fight, is we have seen in previous fights that he tends to opt to try and beat his opponent at their own game, which is, it's great for a confidence boost. It's great going forward, and to go into the cage and beat somebody at where their best must be a phenomenal feeling. He did it against Peter Sabota. He was smashing Sabota on the feet, man, and he just kept on going to the ground, going for the takedowns, trying to take Sabota down. That was Sabota's only path to victory, that ground game. Sabota wasn't going to beat him anywhere else in mixed martial arts yet. Edwards was doing what he needed to do on the feet, but kept opting to go to the ground. And we saw a similar thing with Gunnar Nelson now. I was actually quite impressed with Leon in that fight. A lot of people said they weren't that impressed with him and that he scraped through, etc. But what you've got to remember is Leon was constantly going to the ground and winning positions on the mat, apart from the very last sort of like 20, 30 seconds of the fight, he was going to the ground with a world-class grappler that has handled himself against Damian Maia on the mat. So that just tells you exactly where Gunnar Nelson is in regards to his Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu credentials. But again, the point being in that fight is Leon was attempting every round to put Gunnar Nelson in the one position where Nelson was going to thrive. Even if he was on top, Nelson could have swept or he could have scrambled during a takedown. And I'm telling you, it might work on, and I'm not disrespecting the level of Gunnar. I really like Gunnar Nelson. Like I say, I bet him in that fight, and that's the one place where I wanted the fight to go on the mat. And Leon proved me wrong. His topside grappling and his wrestling was really good, but when you come into the top 5 of the division, you cannot be playing these games. Now, it's a little bit weird with RDA, and this is why I think it's going to be a close fight stylistically, because RDA isn't an Usman where his wrestling's just so dominant. He isn't, I don't know, for example, Darren Till, where he's predominantly a striker and a very good striker. RDA is really well-rounded, so I don't think Edwards can actually make a mistake in regards to where he takes the fight, because RDA is just good everywhere. He doesn't specifically thrive in one area. But it's weird because I feel that RDA is the more skilled fighter overall, in regards to his striking. Obviously, he's a long-time student of Master Rafael Cordeiro from King's MMA, one of the best Muay Thai coaches in the game. And his Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu credentials, I think he's a 3rd-degree black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. So this, from a skill perspective, on the feet and on the mat, RDA is the better fighter. But I just feel in this fight that physical attributes, and I don't always say this, it's not always relevant, but I feel the physical attributes in this fight are actually going to play a major factor in how the fight goes down, because Leon Edwards is the longer fighter, the taller fighter, bigger reach, bigger leg reach. I feel that he's going to be stronger as well. He's the natural welterweight. So although, RDA is smaller and thicker, making that 170-pound limit, I still feel that the strength advantage is going to sit with Leon Edwards. And actually, when you really analyse Edwards and break his fights down, the distance management is really good. His awareness of danger is really good. And actually, the ranges that he can fight at, and fight at well, is just unbelievable. So what I mean by that is when he's at range, so when he's fighting on the outside, his abilities are so good to keep on the outside, to teep kick, to make sure that when his opponent's coming in, he's just stepping out of that range. He showed that against Cowboy really well, and that was a really good fight to show that sort of skill as well, because Cowboy is a very technical fighter. But he's also good at every range coming into the clinch as well, which is key here, because if you hang around with RDA in sort of the boxing range, RDA is going to land low kicks, he's going to land body shots, he's going to mix in combinations. So when you're just sitting there in that one position in that boxing range, that's where RDA is going to really thrive. He showed that against Kevin Lee. Kevin Lee spent way too long in that boxing range. But what Leon Edwards does well is he gets out of the range, so he's on the outside. At each stage as he's coming back inside up until the clinch, he's really effective, but he won't stay in one position at one range for too long. So what I can see happening in this fight is I can see Leon being sort of on the outside, and then when he decides to come in, he won't half commit, he'll just come all the way in and he'll get the clinch. And that's where I feel like he's going to have advantages in this fight. If he doesn't do that, and if he does try and stay in the boxing range of RDA too long, he is going to lose this fight, because RDA will smash the long legs of Edwards, he'll smash the body of Edwards, he'll hit combinations on Edwards, he might even blast double Edwards and take him to the mat. Because that's the other thing as well, I do agree with you, John, with what you're saying, that RDA could score takedowns against Edwards, but they have to be reactive blast doubles in the centre of the cage. I don't see him getting takedowns against the cage, because Edwards' takedown defence is just too good when his back's against the cage. And even if you do get him down, it'll be a case if you get him to one knee and he'll bounce straight back up. But the same thing for RDA as well, when Edwards takes him down, because I do think Edwards is gonna take him down multiple times over the 5 rounds. A little spoiler alert, I do think it's going the distance. So when Leon Edwards does take RDA down, RDA is going to spring back up more often than not. It took, Kamaru Usman took him down 11 or 12 times. He couldn't keep him down. So I don't suspect Edwards is gonna be able to keep him down for too long. But if these rounds are close, man, a takedown could seal a round. And again, it's going to be a really close fight, but it's the little things that that I think are going to win the rounds. And ultimately, I think it's going to be, the more grindy things that win the rounds. I think it's going to be who has the more time in the clinch against the cage, who's the one winning the rounds in that respect, wasting the clock down but doing enough for the referee not to split him up. Who's the one that in a close fight and they've both landed 20 shots each, that's going to score that late takedown and make the judges just edge that round to that one fighter just because of that one difference in the fight. And I just feel that it's Edwards that's going to be scoring those little things in the close fights. I do think it's going to be one of those fights where it's going to go down to the wire. It could potentially be a 3 rounds to do. I don't think any fighter, whoever wins this fight, is going to dominate. But I just feel that Leon Edwards will do just enough, like I say, just the little things that will help edge some of the rounds to him. And for that reason, I am going to take Leon Edwards to win, and I think he's going to win via decision. And in the co-main event of the Newsome MMA main card, we've got Greg Hardy and Juan Adams, 2 guys that clearly don't like each other. John, who have you got?
Yeah, this is a fight that's got some bad blood behind it. Obviously, they've packed no punches in discussing how they feel about one another, especially Juan Adams. He's been very vocal on social media, etc., about how he's looking forward to getting his hands on Greg Hardy. So I don't think there'll be any touch of gloves as the first bell sounds in this fight. And yeah, for me, this is again a very intriguing fight because I still don't entirely know where Greg Hardy's at and where we're seeing his skill set. Obviously, we spoke about the Alan Crowder fight and the Smoliarkov fight. In the build-ups to those, we spoke about how he had his first 3 fights, 2 Dana White Contender Series fights, and then the fight outside of the promotion, which he won all 3 of those in the first round via knockout, all within a minute. And then he came in and fought Alan Crowder. He was a little bit underwhelming. I think there was a bit of octagon jitters in there. He looked to rush things a little bit. He looked to get agitated when he couldn't land shots, and Crowder was being elusive. And then obviously we saw what happened when he landed that illegal knee out of frustration and took the L. Then his last fight against Dmitry Smoliarkov, who had been brought into to fight Hardy. I mean, I think Smoliarkov, no offence to the guy, but I honestly think he was brought in as a lamb to the slaughter, because having watched that fight back in the build up to this podcast, he literally looked as though he didn't want to be in there. I don't think he threw a punch. Dominic Cruz, who was commentating on the fight, said exactly the same thing. He just looked like he wanted out of there. I mean, he kept occasionally trying to dive for a leg and dive for a takedown, which was shrugged off by Greg Hardy because he didn't set them up in any way, shape or form. And then he was just cowering behind that guard, and eventually Greg Hardy landed a couple of nice combination with a couple of shots up against the fence, and then he just curled up in a ball and kind of waited for Greg Hardy to ground and pound him until the ref stepped in. So it was hard to tell, because he looked like he was going up against the guy in that fight who didn't really want to be there, wasn't coming out to fight, wasn't going to kind of challenge in the way that Alan Crowder sort of did. Although he was elusive and tried to tire out Greg Hardy by moving and making Hardy miss and things like that, he was still there to fight more than Smoliarkov was. So it's kind of hard to gauge where Greg Hardy's at, how good he is, what kind of level his striking's at, because obviously, as I mentioned, he struggled somewhat in the Crowder fight. He struggled to gauge the distance. He struggled to contain Crowder and stop Crowder from circling away, which eventually obviously led to the frustrations of the illegal knee and taking the loss. Now, Juan Adams is another big guy. I mean, both of these guys are going to be absolutely huge in there. I mean, I think they're both 6'5". They've both got a big reach as well, about 81 inch reach. So they're both going to match up quite similarly in height and reach and all the physical attributes. Adams, in his last fight, he lost obviously to Arjun Buehler. Spent a lot of that time in the clinch, pressed up against the fence. I mean, Buehler was a lot smaller in that fight, but he did manage to have some success. One thing we've seen with Juan Adams is he does tend to tire after the first round. I know that Chris De La Rocha fight, he won in the third round. but he threw literally everything in the kitchen sink at De La Rocha, and it's just the fact that he has such a rock solid chin that he managed to survive up until round 3, but he just couldn't hang on in there any further. But my worry for Juan Adams in this fight, which we've seen a couple of times, we saw it in the De La Rocha fight and we saw it in the Arjan Bueller fight, is that sometimes he gets a bit wild with his strikes and with his combinations, and he'll march forward and he'll throw 3, 4, 5 shot combinations quite recklessly, not really particularly technical combinations. And he does leave himself slightly exposed, and he's come up against 2 guys so far in De La Rocha and Bueller who aren't particularly heavy hitters. They're not massive punchers. They don't really have that one punch knockout power. Bueller's quite small for the weight class of heavyweight, and yeah, I think the fact that he hasn't gone up against the guy who could just put him away with one shot if he comes in wild and recklessly, similar to what Greg Hardy can do, makes his fight intriguing. And for me, I'm going with the 100% ratio of backing Greg Hardy in his fights in the UFC. I just can't look past the fact that the power that he possesses in his hands, and tie that in with the fact that Juan Adams does like to come charging in and does like to march in with some reckless abandonment and throw those looping shots and those wild hooks and things. I really can see Greg Hardy cracking him with something, and whether he does possess the power to crack him with something that puts him down, because obviously we haven't seen Juan Adams get stopped in his career so far. I don't think he's even been dropped, if I remember rightly, and that's what makes this sport so interesting, and why we're so engrossed in fights like this, because A, we don't really know what level Greg Hardy's at still, and B, we don't know whether he possesses enough power to put away a guy like Juan Adams, who's hard to finish. He looks like he's got a decent chin on him. C, will Juan Adams come out with a wrestling heavy game plan? Would he think that he can win the fight that way? Would he try to obviously expose Greg Hardy's inexperience in the wrestling and the grappling side of things? Maybe, but if from the fights I've seen so far, I know, like I said, in the Smoliakov fight, Smoliakov wasn't really setting up those takedowns, so it's pretty easy for Hardy to shrug off. Possibly he could exploit that. I don't know, but it's really hard to gauge. But I'm going with Greg Hardy to win this fight, and I think he's going to put Juan Adams away. I really do think Juan Adams has got such a bad blood with Greg Hardy, and it seems so personal that the fact that he normally comes out recklessly in fights, with added onto it that bad blood, I think he's going to really come out swinging. I think this could be a fight that doesn't last very long. Even if I get the pick wrong, I think maybe Greg Hardy will get hurt if Adams comes out and starts swinging, because I just think they're both going to come out and swing bombs at each other, and yeah, it's those holes in Juan Adams' combinations and that wildness that I think is going to lead to him getting caught. And I do think Greg Hardy's going to land something, and I do think he possesses the power to knock him down and then follow up and finish the fight. So I am going with Greg Hardy to win this fight, and I think he's going to win via knockout in round 1.
Yeah, I've been massively underwhelmed with Juan Adams. When he first came into the UFC, I saw this Man Mountain, 6'5" dude that was 300 pounds, and you're just looking at him and you're just thinking, wow, this guy is massive. And you know, at the heavyweight division, the bigger you are, the more of an advantage it's going to be, because you know, it's not a division where everyone's massively quick. You know, when people are hitting that 265 pound weight limit, like I say, the speed advantage isn't going to be huge. So for you to be that much bigger inside the cage when the fight does start naturally slowing down and the cardio does start to fall off both sides, just having that little bit of extra strength and aggression and being able to bully your opponent, it just gives you that little bit more in the heavyweight division when you can be that big. But obviously, coming with that, you've got to cut down from 300 pound to 265 pounds. Most heavyweights don't have to cut anything at all. So, but yeah, in regards to Juan Adams, I've been quite underwhelmed because he has been tiring quite early in fights. I know that's That's sort of a common theme with a lot of heavyweight fights. And I'm not saying everyone, but a lot of them. But like I was watching the fight with Arjan Bula, and Juan Adams I actually looked at the clock at the second that I spotted him just come, because he comes out fast. He comes out with decent movement. He pops a jab out there. He puts combinations together, and he looks great. But then you can see it's not like a casual drop in his cardio. It's a complete drop, and you can see from where he's active to then when he's absolutely not. And on the second, it was about 2.5 minutes into the first round where Juan Adams looked great, and then after 2.5 minutes, he completely flatlined, and then he was tired again. Now, the one thing that I will give him credit for is at the end of each round, after he's stood back up from the stool, he gets a second win for like another minute, a minute and a half. Yeah. So even though he's tired towards the end of the round, he'll start the next round quite lively again. But then, like I say, after 60 seconds, 90 seconds in that second and third round, his cardio will just deplete again, and again he'll go back to being slow, to throwing sloppy strikes, to bursting forward, because that's the thing, the volume drops, so he has to burst to make up that volume. And like you mentioned, John, he comes forward quite wild and throwing punches like a rock'em sock'em robot, sort of just running forward in a straight line, head on the centre line, and just putting combinations together, right, left, and just flurrying forward. And I'm telling you, to a decent striker, they are gonna fucking spark him out with that, because it would be it's easy for me to say, but a skilled striker, it's just so easy to just step one way, left or right, and hit a hook around those straight rock'em sock'em robot shots and straight on the side of his chin. And a heavyweight, when someone connects with a big punch, you're gonna go out. Now, I would say, based on what we've seen of Juan Adams so far in his career, that Hardy absolutely wins this fight. But the main thing that you've got to think about here, and something that has to be taken into consideration, is Juan Adams is a D1 wrestler, has a D1 wrestling background. He's also trained with Olympic wrestlers for most of his career. So although we haven't seen that, and again, that's a detriment to his game, and we see it from quite a lot of wrestlers actually, where they just love striking and they don't want to take a fighter down. Also, the other side to this, with it being heavyweight, is takedowns take a lot of energy, cardio, and when Juan Adams is already cutting down from 300 pounds to 265 pounds, it might be a reason why he hasn't shot in for many takedowns, because he just doesn't want to expend that sort of energy in a fight, because if he does and he completely gasses, then he's fucked. But in this fight, I've just got a funny feeling that the power of Greg Hardy may make Juan Adams decide to take the fight to the mat and lay on him. The other side to all this is that Juan Adams is now not cutting from 300 pound. He's been on a strict diet, doing the right things, keeping his weight down. So they've actually started this weight cut from around 285, 290 pounds, I think. So that weight cut is going to be less drastic. So that cardio may improve, which means the wrestling may come. But then the other side of that is, if he's weighing less, yes, his cardio may improve from that, but if he's weighing less, he's going to be not as strong as what he's used to feeling, and he's almost going to be at a new weight because of the drastic cut. And I always have concerns with that with fighters, and I said the same thing with Luke Rockhold a couple of weeks ago. I always have this concern that when a fighter is at a new weight, there's going to be a whole host of new things that their body is they're gonna have to adapt to with the body, speed, cardio, strength, all this sort of stuff. When you're going up or down in weight, this sort of stuff changes, and fighters normally need 1 or 2 fights just to feel that new weight and how they're going to react and how they're going to cope, and they're going to know how it feels the next time around. So there is red flags regarding Juan Adams in regards to that. Is he going to try and clinch up with Hardy, thinking he's going to be stronger than what he is, and Hardy just being the stronger dude inside there? So there's a lot of things to take into consideration in this fight. It's not as simple as it seems. However, one point that you made, John, is, and I absolutely agree with this as well, because Adams hates Hardy as much as he does. I mean, this whole cutting weight from a lighter weight is because he just doesn't want to lose to Hardy. He's obsessed with not losing. So because he's obsessed with not losing, because he hates him so much, I do actually think the same as you. I do think he's going to try and knock him out, run forward, wing bombs, because nothing is going to make him feel better than dropping Hardy on the feet and then finishing him on the mat. That is the ultimate goal for Juan Adams in this fight, and I just feel that if he runs at Hardy, Hardy's going to be able to find one of those shots that I spoke about earlier, around the rock'em sock'em robot shots, and just clipping him on the jaw and knocking him out. Now, for those that like a narrative, one thing to mention with this fight as well is, according to Juan Adams, all the way through Hardy's career, Juan Adams has wanted to fight Greg Hardy. Outside of the UFC as well, he tried to get it matched up in other promotions. When they both came to the Dana White Contender Series, they tried to match it up for that. Then when they came in the UFC, they've tried to match him up with that. And apparently, again, according to Adams, Hardy and his team, and obviously the UFC once he's got in there, just didn't want anything to do with this fight. And I actually believe it. I genuinely believe it, because the UFC, American Top Team, and Greg Hardy all see this natural development and a fighter that can progress quite, in my opinion, quite highly, and in their opinion, quite highly as well. So why would they stick a fighter like that against another huge heavyweight in Juan Adams that's got a wrestling background? So I do actually believe that narrative in regards to they didn't want this fight. But it's weird how Hardy, American Top Team, the UFC and Dana White have all decided now it's the time to give him this fight. I think that they've seen Juan Adams' last two performances against Arjun Bula, fight which I thought he won, by the way, and Chris De La Rocha, also in the Contender Series with Sean Teed. I think they've seen the actual level of where Juan Adams is at, and I actually think they think this is a good fight for Hardy. If Juan Adams comes out wrestling, I'm telling you that opinion is going to change instantly. But Hardy's got decent takedown defense. He's also shown against Crowder he can get back up to his feet as well. So it all depends on how heavy Juan Adams would be on top if he does get the takedowns. But like I say, ultimately, I think the fight is won and lost on the feet. I think Juan Adams does rush forward. I think Hardy does find a counter shot, and I think Hardy will knock him out. So I've got Greg Hardy to win. I'm going to take him to win via knockout. And in the next fight of the Newsome MMA main card, we've got a really intriguing fight in James Vick and Dan Hooker. John, who have you got?
Yeah, this is again a really, really fun fight, and one that I'm really looking forward to seeing. Obviously, James Vick's entering this fight on the back of back-to-back losses to Justin Gaethje. Obviously, that horrendous knockout in about a year ago now, in August of last year, and then that was followed up in February of this year with that decision loss against Paul Felder. And then he's going up against a guy in Dan Hooker who took a more prolonged but equally as brutal beating to Edson Barboza as Vick did to Gaethje, and that was in December of last year. I'm glad that Hooker's had a good stint off, half a year, well, just over half a year on the sidelines, because man, he didn't half get beaten up quite badly in that fight. And yeah, again, for me, this is another really close fight. And yeah, a lot of people, James Vick obviously himself had been calling for the top level guys in the division for quite a long time, and then he got one in Gaethje, and he got absolutely destroyed with that one shot, and then he fought Paul Felder, and there's quite a lot of when I watched that back, I forgot there was quite a lot of boos on the crowd, because Vick just looked like he wanted to clinch up. Quite often he was clinching up with Felder up against the fence, and I don't know whether he was a bit tentative after that Gaethje knockout, but I mean, it kind of has to be in the back of your mind at some point. And when you look back now through, it's quite interesting when you see guys on a good winning streak and then they lose a couple of fights, and you look back on those wins and things, and you start to think, were they as good as we think they were? Obviously, he lost to Beneil Dariush, and then he beat Abel Trujillo, Polo Reyes, Joe Duffy, and Francisco Trinaldo. The Trinaldo fight was pretty close. Joe Duffy's on a bit of a decline, and Duffy had some success in that fight actually. In the first two rounds, he lost in the last second of the second round by a big shot that Vick put him down, and he finished it off with the second to go. But Joe Duffy had some success boxing in the first couple of rounds there as well. Polo Reyes, he's okay. Trujillo, he's decent again, but as soon as he's come up against guys like real top level guys, Gaethje and Felder, I mean, he has struggled, and And one thing that worries me massively against James Vick is his strengths are also seem to lead to his weaknesses. Obviously, he's massive for the weight class. He's huge. He's 6'3", cuts a lot of weight. Obviously, that will deplete his chin. We saw that in the Gaethje fight. Obviously, another of his strengths is going to be his range and his length, and he utilises that really well. Actually, he moves in and out of range well. He's got good kicks to be able to maintain distance. He does throw the straight shots, which enables him to keep distance. But if he does like that step back and then fire back with the right hand as well. So when you're coming, obviously 95% of the fighters he's going up against, the smaller of them have got less of a reach. So when they're reaching in or they're stepping in with their shots, he kind of steps back and then counters with the straight, which is nice. But one thing that does worry me about James Vick, and it was mentioned a lot in the Felder fight because he got rocked several times in that fight, and it was also what led to the knockout in the Gaethje fight, was a lot of the time he'll lean back from his waist with his chin up in the air, and he doesn't tuck that chin back, and he'll take a couple of steps back, as I just mentioned, when he likes to fire off that straight. But if his opponent keeps coming forward with shots, he then kind of tends to plant his feet and lean back from his waist, and that exposes his chin. His chin's high up in the air, and if he gets connected on, he gets hurt. And as I've said, we saw that in the Felder and the Gaethje fight. So that really is the key to victory. Is against Vick, I think, is to get in close, to throw combinations, to be able to force him back. Don't just throw one or two punches, because if you do that, he can step back and then counter with the straight himself. You have to go in there with 3 and 4 shot combinations, and if you mix it up to the body as well against him, you stand a real good chance of forcing him to leaning back with that chin up in the air. And we've seen Dan Hooker has knockout power, but again, this is a guy who, after losing to Edson Barboza in his last fight, it's one of those where you kind of reevaluate his win streak. He was on a 4-fight win streak. Ross Pearson in 2017. Pearson, he's obviously he's now retired from MMA, but he was at the tail end of his career. Mark DeCasey, he was really struggling for confidence during that part of his when those two matched up, and I think he just lost the fight to I can't think off the top of my head. Drakkar Klose, I think it was, and then he went up against Dan Hooker, if I remember rightly, and yeah, I think he just lost a bit of confidence from losing that fight against Klose. So maybe it was a good time to fight him. Then he fought Jim Miller, again a guy at the tail end of his career. Then Gilbert Burns, who was going through a bit of a purple patch himself with finishing people and wanting to stand and bang against people, and that kind of played into the hands of Dan Hooker. And I think if Gilbert Burns would have utilised his strength, which obviously is grappling and things like that, he may have stood a lot better chance, and it may have been more of a struggle for Dan Hooker. So it's quite interesting to see the win streaks of these two guys. How at the time we think, oh yeah, these are very good win streaks. And obviously you can only beat the guys that are put in front of you, but then when you have the chance to look back and evaluate, and a couple of years have passed, and you kind of can gather a bit more scope on the landscape of where the fighters are at that time in their careers. Maybe sometimes these win streaks don't quite look as good as they are at the time of happening. But I'm diverting slightly from the actual fight itself. For me, it's going to be a case of how Vick comes out in this fight, as opposed to how Dan Hooker comes out in this fight. I think Dan Hooker's going to come out aggressively, like he always does. He tends to hold his hands quite low, and he's happy to step in there and fight in the pocket against you. But it'd be interesting to see how Vick fights, whether he's a bit tentative, like he looked in the Felder fight, whether he does want to try and clinch up, and whether he maybe attempts a takedown. But that's a dangerous game because Hooker's got some very good offensive grappling. When Gilbert Burns tried for a takedown, he tried to jump into a choke straight away. So that'll be interesting to see. Vick throws a lot of kicks, and I think that's his key to victory, which he quite often is keep him on the end of your punches and the kicks, because he does have a lot of good kicks. He throws good spinning kicks as well. He mixes up the low and the high kicks, body kicks, and then add to that the 1-2s. I think he does possess all the skills and all the abilities to be able to win this fight against Dan Hooker, and I am going with James Vick to win this fight. I do think he's going to come out like that. I do think he's going to come out and really try and maintain distance, utilise the kicks like he does so well. Maybe I'll spend a bit of time in the clinch like in the Paul Felder fight, but I do think he'll be a bit more after the Felder fight, and the fact that he did get rocked a couple of times but he didn't get put away. I think that'll give him a bit more confidence to be a bit more aggressive in the striking than he was in the Felder fight, and I think Vick's output will be a bit higher. Hooker, I'm still a bit unsure of. He does possess power, as we've seen, but wins knockouts over Ross Pearson and Jim Miller. I don't know how much I can take from that. I don't know if he'll be able to put away James Vick. If Felder didn't put away Vick, I think Felder's a much better striker than, well, I don't want to say much better, but I think he's a better striker than Dan Hooker. So that doesn't fill me with the confidence that Dan Hooker's going to go in there and be able to finish James Vick. So for that reason, I think it's going to last the distance. I think it's going to go the 3 rounds, and if it goes the 3 rounds, I think James Vick's going to be able to utilise his reach with those kicks and the punches, and I think he's going to edge a decision. So I'm going with James Vick to win this fight via decision.
Yeah, man, like you mentioned it a couple of times with James Vick getting rocked, and first and foremost, I just wish the dude would move up to welterweight, because
right.
It'd still be a big welterweight. The weight cut would be drastically less. I genuinely think that I'd improve his durability as well, and I just think he'd be a monster up at welterweight, and I think he'd have more success at welterweight than what he would at lightweight. But that's a different story. Now it's interesting looking at, and you mentioned it as well, John, the comparison with Vick and Gaethje, Hooker and Barboza, and I think there's a big difference in between those two losses, because basically when Justin Gaethje brutalized James Vick, his body shut down. So when he landed that shot, he went unconscious, his body shut down as it's supposed to do. Whereas Hooker, on the other hand, was way worse, because that beating what Barboza gave him was honestly one of the worst beatings I've ever seen in mixed martial arts. The fact that Hooker was so tough, the fact that his body wouldn't shut down, he wouldn't go away, he kept on standing back up, and the beating just got worse and worse. And by the time that you look at that fight from start to finish, and I don't say this a lot, and I do think that some people overuse this phrase, but that could have been a life-changing beating. It was horrendous, to the point where I think that the referee should be disgusted at himself. I think Hooker's team should be disgusted at themselves as well. I know they might say, oh, well, our fighter will never want that towel thrown in. Our fighter wants to stay in there until he's put out. Fuck that. That was a brutal fight. Throw the towel in. Let him get pissed off at you. Let him get pissed off at the corner team, but he lives to fight another day. You know, he'll go again at a later date without taking that beating. That beating could have done some long-term damage to Hooker. People might disagree with it. If him or his team hear this, they might disagree. That's just my opinion, man. The towel should have been in, or the referee should have stopped the fight. There's no way that fight should have gone on for as long as it did. But coming back to this fight, I were a massive fan, and I still am a fan of Hooker and his skills. You know, that Barboza fight hasn't really changed my opinion on him, because Barboza is just a beast, a natural beast, and he will do that to a lot of fighters. But I would have been a lot higher on Hooker in this fight if this was pre-Barboza. Now we've seen Hooker take that beating. You're never sure what fighter is going to come back into the cage. Is Hooker going to come into the cage and just have that confidence that he had before the Barboza fight? You know, sort of put that behind him as a bad night and carry on where he left off before that, or will he come in a little bit tentative? Will he sort of second guess things? Will he need, sort of half a round or a round to feel his way into the fight? And at that point, that's half a round or a round that you've lost in only a 3-round fight. You can't get away with that in a 15-minute fight. So there's a lot of questions about Hooker coming into this fight. And as for James Vick, I think stylistically it's going to be a close fight. Vick's going to be taller than Hooker, which is another thing that I actually favour Vick over Hooker with, because he's actually quite a big lightweight himself. He's 6 foot. So in a lot of Hooker's fights, he's normally the bigger guy. He's normally the ranger guy. He's normally the guy that, like I mentioned with Leon Edwards earlier on, can stay on the outside kicking, or when he comes in, he can come in hard with elbows and knees. That's sort of the game that Hooker has been able to play against most of the other opposition that he's had at lightweight, and obviously down at featherweight when he fought there. But in this fight with Vick, this is actually going to be a new scenario for Hooker, because he's not going to be the taller guy in there. He's not going to be the guy with the length and the range advantage. If he stays on the outside, he's probably going to get hit. If he's going to have to come in. He's got to come in with Vick. But then when he comes in with Vick on the inside boxing, normally he likes the knees. We saw him knock out Ross Pearson with a knee. We saw him knock out Jim Miller with a knee. He's also got nice elbows. His Muay Thai base actually is really good. But against a taller fighter in Vick, those knees aren't going to be available to the head. The elbows, he'll have to be in very close to land an elbow on the chin of Vick. So he's basically going to have to be relying on his boxing opposed to his Muay Thai. And this, like I say, it's going to be a very different fight for Hooker. He's, like I've already mentioned, he's going to be the shorter fighter, and the weapons that he normally uses against fighters being the taller guy, and the ranges that he normally uses, he's not going to be there for him. He's going to have had a really tailor-made game plan for James Vick. And for that reason, I do favour James Vick. I feel that Vick's going to be in there against a fighter that's just coming off an absolute brutal beating, a fighter that is never going to have seen an opponent that like James Vick in regards to his physical attributes, a fighter where his main weapons generally aren't going to be there, and if they are, they're not going to be as effective. So that's going to make Hooker really start to have to change his game up, make different reads, and just fight in a completely different way. And for James Vick, it's just going to be the same old. Yeah, Hooker's a little bit taller than his normal opponents, but that doesn't matter. James Vick is still going to be able to fight his fight. He's still going to be able to fight long. He's still going to come in with the straight shots. And if Hooker starts getting hit a couple of times with these straight shots, I'm telling you, the flashbacks I think will be there from the Barboza fight. And I just think it's a bad fight for Hooker to come back to. I do think it's going to be, it's going to be relatively close when it goes to the judges' scorecards, which I do think it's going to go to. I think the Hooker's path to victory, though, is to get inside and land. I mean, they've got 4-ounce gloves on at the end of the day. If he can get inside and land a hard shot on Vick's chin, there's every chance that he can put James Vick out. But I think Vick is going to manage that distance and that reach a little bit better than what Hooker is, because, like I say, Hooker's going to be facing a lot of new things for him, I think, in this fight. And I do think that Vick is going to point him to a decision. When it gets to the decision, I can see it being one of those 29-28s, but I just see Vick getting his arm raised at the end of the night. I think, like I say, just everything surrounding the fight really, really does put Vick in better stead. And I think Vick's got the tools to beat somebody like Hooker. I mean, in Vick's last fight against Felder, he was doing quite well against Felder, who's also got a similar style, ironically, to Dan Hooker. And also, ironically, I would like to see that fight between Hooker and Felder. I think that'd be a great fight stylistically, but that's a different fight. Now, where Vick lost that fight against Felder was the low kicks, the calf kicks that really, really shut Vick down completely. So maybe Hooker can see that Felder fight and think, okay, I know I've got to get inside and things like that. I know things are going to be a little bit different, but let me break down that leg first and then we see where we go from there. But even though Vick started to limp towards the end of that fight, he was still in the fight, man. It wasn't all one-way traffic with Felder. So I think Vick's got heart, and as long as Vick doesn't get knocked out in this fight, I think that he's going to be ahead on the judges' scorecards. I'm taking James Vick to win. I'm going to take him to win via decision. And in the next fight on the Newsome MMA main card, we've got Alexander Hernandez returning against Francisco Trinaldo. Now, for me, this is a great fight. I'm a big fan of Trinaldo. We've obviously got a surging fighter in the lightweight division coming up in Alexander Hernandez. People are still a little bit unsure about Hernandez. I'm not unsure about his skills. I'm just unsure about his ceiling. And I think that the Donald Cerrone fight was really really brought Hernandez back down to earth, because at this point he'd come into the UFC, he'd sparked Beneil Dariush in like 40 seconds, he'd absolutely demoralised and dominated Olivier Aubin-Mercier. Actually, looking back at that fight a second time, it wasn't as impressive as what I thought it was when I originally watched it, obviously live, but man, it was still a good performance from Hernandez. You know, it wasn't Aubin-Mercier being bad. Hernandez brought that fight to him. Hernandez was the one that was aggressive, landing combinations and ultimately pushing towards getting Aubin-Mercier against the cage to take him down. Comfortable victory on the scorecards in the end in that fight. But here in Trinaldo, he's going to be in familiar territory, but different territory at the same time as well. So what I mean by that is Hernandez's wins in the UFC have come against, as I've already mentioned, Aubin-Mercier and Beneil Dariush. But what those two fighters have in common is they're both southpaws, and so's Trinaldo. So Alexander Hernandez is coming into this fight against yet another southpaw, but he's already beaten two southpaws in the UFC. So I feel that he actually doesn't mind fighting southpaws. A lot of his game and his style actually suits fighting southpaws. You know, the coming forward, the straight shots down the pipe, and you know, trying to push them against the cage, grabbing a single leg. Because as I say, when you're a fighter looking to get the fight to the mat, and you're an orthodox versus a southpaw, that lead leg is closest to your lead arm. So again, when you're looking for single legs, you can get that single leg that a bit quicker when the styles match up, the stances match up like that. So his game actually suits fighting southpaws. But the reason why he's in slightly different territory is because one thing that Aubin-Mercier didn't have, and one thing Dariush didn't have, is overhand lefts and kicks. And those two things are Trinaldo's biggest weapons. And those two things are used as a southpaw to keep orthodox fighters away, stop them from aggressing, stop them from pressing too much, and ultimately stop them from getting inside. And if they're looking for the takedown, to stop the entries on the takedowns as well. Yes, you could always catch a kick, but looking at Trinaldo's kicks, I'm not sure I'd ever be recommending to a fighter to try and take one of those kicks to the body to catch it, because it's going to be pretty nasty. But then those kicks also come to the head, they also come to the leg as well. He uses them at different heights, which is great. But then that overhand left as well, and that's also a big weapon when fighters start getting a little bit aggressive on Trinaldo. The overhand lefts come, and the bombs and the kicks just keep fighters away. And this is why I quite like Trinaldo. He comes from Evolucao with Master Andrei Dida, again another great Muay Thai coach that I'm a fan of. So his Muay Thai and his kickboxing is absolutely on point. I can see Alexander Hernandez having some issues in this fight for sure, but I think those issues are going to come early on, and I think he's going to lose that first round. I do actually like Hernandez to win this fight, and the reason being is, although the Trinaldo possesses some stylistic abilities, like I've said with the overhand left and the kick to the open body, I do feel that Hernandez can put a pace and pressure on Trinaldo for the majority of the fight, for all 15 minutes, where I don't feel that Trinaldo can cope with that pressure for all 15 minutes. So I think he'll do well in round one, as I've already mentioned, but Trinaldo does slow down a little bit, and this is just against, you know, your average paced fighters. But I think if Hernandez really does put pace and pressure on Trinaldo for the first couple of rounds, I think he may drop the first. I think he'll take the second just, and then come the third round, I think if it goes 1-1 into that third round, I'm absolutely backing Hernandez to win that fight, because I just see him having more in the gas tank, having more aggression. I think Trinaldo will have had to deal with a fighter going at 100 miles an hour for 10 minutes. And I just think that Trinaldo will just be one step behind by this point. His shots will be a little slower. The power won't be as great. When the power's not great, Hernandez can walk through those shots to press him up against the cage and take him down. I don't think Trinaldo's that great off his back. So if Hernandez is on top, I do see him having a lot of success there. So although I do feel that it's actually quite a dangerous fight for Hernandez, because Trinaldo poses some great stylistic threats, I do see Hernandez pulling through the fight with pure pace, pressure, and then eventually it'll just come down to cardio and takedowns, and I think that'll win him the fight. So I'm actually picking Hernandez to win, and I'm going to take him to win via decision. John, who have you got?
Yeah, I think you've broke down that fight really well. Actually, I think you've also spelled it out how it's pretty much going to go down. I think that Trinaldo will have success on the feet, especially early on. He's got good kicks. He mixes them up well to the legs, body, head. He's got those spinning attacks as well. But he does notoriously tend to struggle against those grinding style guys, Kevin Lee, Piotr Hallman, Gleason Tebow, Michael Chiesa. He arguably lost that Norman Park fight that he got given the split decision. And yeah, it's usually those guys that put a pace on and try and wear on him and grind on him that he tends to struggle against. And I think Alexander Hernandez does fall into that bracket. Obviously, we've seen that Hernandez has got one punch knockout power. We saw that in the Dariush fight. We saw that he can put a pace on and wrestle and grind you out. We saw that in the Aubin Mercier fight. I think the problem with the Cerrone fight was he had the right sort of game plan to beat Cerrone, because to beat Cerrone you have to really get in his face and push him back. He doesn't like that, but he was coming in too much of a straight line, not moving his head, not cutting angles, and Cerrone was able to just pick him off as he was coming in. And I think he'll have learned a lot from that fight. I think him and his team will have gone away, looked at that, saw how they could implement a game plan where they can put a heavy pace and heavy pressure on, but also at the same time ensure that he doesn't get hit on the way in. And yeah, I think Trinaldo's going to have success in the first round. One thing that I did also pick up when I was watching the tape was Cerrone hit Alexander Hernandez with a lot of those knees up the middle to the body, and obviously Trinaldo put away Evan Dunham in his last fight in exactly that fashion, with a big knee to the liver, which you could barely even see it even on the replays. He stepped in and hit it with such pace and ferocity that if you blink it and you miss it. But that's something as well that Hernandez will have to be aware of in this fight. But yeah, ultimately I think it's going to play out exactly how you said. I think Trinaldo is going to win the first fight. I think Hernandez is going to try and push the pace, try and get a few takedowns, but Trinaldo's got decent takedown defense, so I think he'll be able to stuff them early on. But I think then he'll tire as he comes out in the second round and the pace starts to get to him. I think Hernandez may land a takedown or two in that round, spend a bit of time on top, and then when Trinaldo comes out in the third round, I think he'll be tired. I think Hernandez will be able to then land a takedown early on, and I think he'll be able to spend the majority of the round, if not all of the round, in top control. And I do see him eking out a very close decision, given the fact that I do think he'll lose the first round. So obviously all depends how that middle round plays out. But yeah, I ultimately think Alexander Hernandez is going to have enough to be able to wear down Trinaldo over the course of 3 rounds and win a decision. So I'm going with Hernandez to win this fight.
And in the next fight on the Newsome MMA main card, we've got Andrei Arlovski versus Ben Rothwell. This is actually a rematch as well from all the way back in 2008, I believe it was. It didn't go well for Rothwell that night. It was 11 years ago, so a lot has changed since then. And really, when you look at Andrei Arlovski right now, the dude is not on a great run at all when you look in the grand scheme of things. In his last 11 fights, he's only won twice, dating back to 2016. So that's obviously a lot of fights in 3 years, but that's also a lot of fights to lose and not a lot of fights to win. And the only wins that he's actually got is Junior Albini, who we now know is pretty terrible, and I'm going to be very surprised if he has another fight in the UFC. I think he'll be done now. And Stefan Struve, who's now subsequently retired. So you look at those being his only 2 wins in the last 11 fights, and it's really just, it's not a great recent record at all, and it is showing obvious signs of decline now. The one thing that I will say in defense of Arlovski is the dude just cannot catch a break at the minute. You know, the Tai Tuivasa fight could have easily swung his way. Abdurakhimov, there were some people calling Arlovski, saying Arlovski should have won that fight. Walt Harris, I believe that Arlovski could have won that fight. That obviously got overturned with the no contest from Walt Harris due to him popping in that fight for whatever that was. And then Augusto Sakai was a fucking robbery. Like, I actually went to the toilet. I was watching that card with my mate, and as soon as the final bell rang, I went to the toilet, and I was just like, oh, it's 30-27 to Arlovski, that, or 29-28 at worst. And then I came back downstairs, And my mate was like, oh my God, Sakai won. I was like, nah, fuck off. No, he didn't. And he was like, no, seriously, he did. I didn't believe him. I thought he was just having me on. And when I actually went onto Wikipedia and looked, I was just like, oh my God. Like I say, all these fights are going to decisions, and they're all either relatively close or Arlovski should just be tipping them, and he's just not getting any look at the minute. But when it comes into this fight with Ben Rothwell, we saw he came back after a decent layoff against Blagoy Ivanov, and talk about fucking robbery. That fight was also a robbery. So, you know, Rothwell's sort of been on the wrong end of a decision in his last fight also. But in that fight with Ivanov, I think that it was actually tailor-made for Rothwell, and I bet Rothwell in that fight, because Ivanov doesn't offer much in regards to movement and volume, and that's where I thought Rothwell, who's not the fastest and most agile striker himself, he's quite agile for his size actually, but he's not rapid, let's put it that way. So him fighting Ivanov, who again was just very slow, low volume, I do feel that Rothwell could have started to tee off on Ivanov. I don't think he was in any danger of Ivanov knocking him out, but I don't know whether it was ring rust or something, but Rothwell did make that fight closer than it should have been. You know, I know I'm saying he should have won the decision, but he could have also made that fight a lot more decisive as well. A couple of occasions he connected with a big shot against Ivanov, looked that it stunned him, but then he took his foot off the gas a little bit and reset and went again. So it was just little things that could have been down to ring rust. Whereas Arlovski in this fight, he's not Ivanov. Arlovski does move fairly well. Arlovski does have a decent gas tank. He does have decent volume. He will pop a jab out there. Now, we've spoken about for years about how Arlovski had gone from being totally chinny to the fact that we thought he was all shot. And then he started to sort of build his chin back up again, and now he hasn't been knocked out in so long. So I think this is the fight where he actually gets knocked out again, though, because even though I think he's going to have a slight speed advantage and a slight volume advantage, I think Rothwell is going to catch him relatively early. I think he's going to clip him. I think Arlovski won't go down with that shot. But once Arlovski feels that power again, and it might stun him, Arlovski may be a little bit hesitant to come forward, especially when Rothwell's the bigger guy in there. We've seen him stone cold knock people out since he last fought Arlovski. Like I said, he's a different fighter now. I don't think Arlovski can resort to any wrestling, because I feel that Rothwell will wrap that nasty guillotine up that he's got and choke him out if that happens, if Arlovski does decide to shoot in on a single or a double. I think the fight is going to play out on the feet. I think there is going to be some moments in the clinch, but again, Rothwell's going to be the bigger, stronger guy. I think he'll dominate, whilst Arlovski's back is against the cage. But like I say, I think Rothwell over the 15-minute period is going to land 2 or 3 really heavy shots, and I think they'll stun Arlovski early on, but I think one of the shots a little bit later down the line will stun him that little bit more, maybe rock him. I think Rothwell will come forward, he'll land another shot that'll probably put Arlovski down, or he'll turtle up on the mat, and the referee will just have to jump in to save him, or Rothwell will just catch him and knock him clean out cold. And the referee, therefore, it won't be a case of saving Arlovski. It'll just be a case of stopping the fight because it's over, because Arlovski's unconscious. I do see a potential path to victory for Arlovski to outpoint Rothwell if he can stay out of those power shots, just rack up the volume and just make sure he's the more active fighter in the cage. Because if it does go 3 rounds, I do suspect that Arlovski will have a great chance of winning, because it'll be one of those fights where the judges will be looking at power against volume. Because although Rothwell won't land as much as Arlovski, he'll land the more devastating shots, or should we say the harder shots. So it'll be one of them where it could go down to a split decision again, and whoever's looks in on the night will get the hand raised. But ultimately, I am going Rothwell to win, and I think he's going to win via knockout. John, who have you got?
Yeah, this is a fight between 2 guys who you said are coming into the fight off the back of robbery losses. Rothwell beat Blagoy Ivanov, and Arlovski beat Augusto Sakai, and both guys were unfortunate to be announced as the losers in those fights. And actually, on a side note, I did mention the Ivanov fight. If I pick that fight wrong, I'm no longer betting on an Ivanov fight. So I don't think that I forgot about that, because whatever way I go with Ivanov, it's always the opposite. So yeah, I haven't forgot about that. But Yeah, Arlovski's gone from the pit bull to more of the terrier. I think he just tends to hide behind the jab and the 1-2. Now will occasionally throw in those kicks, but yeah, he doesn't really. I think he knows that he had a bit of a chinny patch, and people were talking about his chin, and he did get caught a few times. And I think he just kind of plays it safe now. He doesn't really do anything to put himself in any massive danger. And I think that's the reason why recently he's lost so many decisions, because obviously the Sakai fight was a bit of an anomaly, because he should have got the win in that fight, but the rest of the time he's just not active enough, and he just doesn't do enough to comprehensively get the judges on his side to give him the nod. And yeah, I think that's a problem for him, because I think if he does start to get more aggressive to win those decisions, or to try and put his opponent away, I think he leaves himself vulnerable to being knocked out, which again I think is a very big possibility in this fight, because Rothwell does possess power. We know that. We saw that in the Overeem fight, Brandon Vera, Brennan Schaub fight. But it's his movement and his strange angles, his crazy footwork and things like that. Now I think this is going to be one of those fights where not very much happens until something happens. Now that sounds quite obvious, but I think it's going to be a lot of movement, a lot of especially on Rothwell's behalf, a lot of Arlovski pumping the jab, feinting the jab, probably not connecting very much because Rothwell moves around. But then I think when something happens, I think something big will happen. I think that something big is, like you said, I think Rothwell will be able to cut an angle. I think he'll be able to land a shot on Arlovski, and I think that shot could rock him, could wobble him. But whether he puts him away, I don't know. Maybe it'll force him into shooting for a takedown, which obviously then he may get caught in one of those chokes, or whether it'll just give Rothwell the opportunity to latch onto something, or to just flurry and try and put him away. I'm not sure, but I do see it being quite a tentative encounter until and I can only see this being one-sided as well, by the way. I only think it's going to be Rothwell that lands something big that causes this big thing to happen. I can't see Arlovski landing any big powerful shots and wobbling Ben Rothwell or knocking Rothwell down or anything like that. I think it's only going to be one side. I think it's either going to be Rothwell puts him away in the fashion that I've just mentioned, or I think Rothwell's going to take a decision because he lands the harder shots. I think he will, after that even-off fight, I think he will be a bit more willing to throw a few more counters and not let it be so close in the judge's eyes. I think his output will be a bit higher, and yeah, for that reason, I can only see one winner. I only think it's going to be Ben Rothwell. I'm going to give Arlovski the benefit of the doubt. I'm going to go with the latter of the two scenarios. I think he's going to be able to keep his distance and play that sensible game plan that he has done for multiple fights recently, and I think he's going to go the distance with Ben Rothwell. So I'm going to go with Ben Rothwell to win via decision, but it wouldn't surprise me at all in the slightest if he played out the way that you mentioned, or the way that I've also just echoed there with Rothwell putting Arlovski away with something.
And with the Newsome MMA main card complete, we'll now move on to the Newsome MMA Prelims. And first up is Aleksei Oleinik versus Walt Harris, a great stylistic matchup. John, who have you got?
Yeah, really fun fight to which is the co-main event actually on the card, and one that I'm really looking forward to. Obviously, the threat with Oleinik is the submissions. He'll pull guard if he has to. He'll do whatever he needs to do to land an Ezekiel choke or a neck crank or anything like that. Walt Harris is more of a striker. He comes forward. I mean, he's been a lot more aggressive in his last couple of fights. That Daniel Spitz fight, and I was really impressed with his performance against Spivak in his last fight. One thing I do really like about Walt Harris, which is how I see this fight ending, is when he backs you up against the fence, he now starts to really throw flurries and combinations. And when he backed Spivak up against the fence, he landed a a 12-15 shot combination, including follow-up strikes to put him away in the first round. And that's something I really like about Walt Harris. And Oleinik is getting older. He's suffered a few knockout losses recently. Got his blades, obviously over him in his last fight, and yeah, I think Walt Harris is going to win this fight. I think he's going to be able to take down the takedown. He's going to be able to stuff the takedown attempts of Oleinik. I think he's going to, at some point, first or second round, I think he's going to be able to back Oleinik up against the fence. So I think he's going to flurry. A couple of those shots will get through, causing Oleinik to turtle up, and I think Harris will put it away with ground and pound on the mat. So I'm going with Walt Harris to win this fight, and I think he wins via knockout.
Yeah, it's a really good fight stylistically because it's absolutely grappler versus striker in this fight. Obviously, Oleinik, we all know his grappling and submission credentials in mixed martial arts. It's absolutely nuts. He's also got by far the more experience over Walt Harris. Then you look at Walt Harris, absolutely the striker. I think all wins have come by knockout. And, you know, when you really look at his ground game, it's really not there. Just like Oleinik's striking isn't going to really be there against someone like Harris. So in this fight, you're absolutely going to get Harris coming forward wanting to strike. You're really going to get Oleinik coming forward wanting to get the fight to the mat at some point. Now, I do feel that if Oleinik wins this fight, I think we're going to see another Ezekiel choke because first of all, I don't think Harris is that great on the mat. And I know I'm going to use the Verdum fight as an example, and I know that Walt Harris came into that fight short notice. He didn't have time to prepare, and I know Verdum is a world-class Brazilian jiu-jitsu fighter, but he armbarred him within a minute of that fight, which he just took him down, dominated, got him to the position where he needed to be and finished him. It was really like a knife through butter, and I feel that even though Harris definitely hasn't got anywhere close to the credentials of jiu-jitsu and grappling as what Oleinik has, I definitely don't think he'll have nailed down that Ezekiel choke defense. So I can see when Harris coming forward, I can definitely see a path to victory for Oleinik to tie up with him in the clinch and actually set that Ezekiel choke up standing up in the clinch like we've seen before, drop down to his back and choke him out of it. I can absolutely see that happening, and I think if Oleinik wins, it's going to be that type of submission. I don't think it's going to be sort of like a rear naked choke or anything like that. I think he's going to have success at tying that Ezekiel choke up on the feet if Harris gets too close and they clinch up. But ultimately, I just think the power of Harris is just going to keep Oleinik just outside of that range where he can jolt in and get a hold of the clinch. I think he's going to get hurt from a couple of the strikes. The first one that lands is going to send a shock down the body of Oleinik. I think that's going to really make him probably attempt to shoot a desperate double or a single opposed to wanting to get in closer to the guy that's bombing on you. You know, that's the last thing you want to do. So I think Walt Harris is going to have more success in the fight just because the fight starts on the feet, and I think when Oleinik comes in, he's going to get cracked. Like I said, after the first shot or the second shot that he gets hit hard with, panic bells and alarm bells are going to start ringing in Oleinik's head. I think he's going to shut down. I think Harris is going to knock him out. And in the next fight, we've got Alex Caceres versus Stephen Peterson. John, who have you got?
Yeah, this is quite, again, theme of the night. This is quite a close fight. It's going to be interesting to see how this plays out. I haven't been massively impressed with Peterson so far. Obviously got that win in against Matt Becerra in the Ultimate Fighter finale split decision. Lost to Luis Pena. He's lost to Brandon Davis. He's going up against a guy in Caceres who's a veteran. He's seen it all. He's gone up against some of the best guys. Obviously, he's coming off a loss to Crone Gracie, who's a legitimate grappling wizard, and you probably won't come up against anyone like that for a long time. I'm going with Bruce Leroy to win this fight. I think striking. I think he's got the more versatility. He throws in those kicks nicely. I think Peterson will try and grind Caceres, which he may land a few takedowns because you can take Caceres down. Peterson did land a couple of takedowns on Luis Pena as well, so it wouldn't surprise me if he took him down a couple of times. But Caceres, he either gets back to his feet really well, or he gives up his back and gets stopped by a rear naked choke. It's either one or the other. It doesn't seem to be anything else other than the two of those things. And and I'm going with him to do the former and to be able to get back to his feet, and then turn this back into a striking battle. And I think he's going to edge the stand up over Peterson. I think it's going to be another fight that goes to decision. But yeah, I just think Caceres' output, I think those his kicks and will be able to keep Peterson at range. And I just think overall, I think he'll look better in the judges' eyes when Peterson's clinching up against the fence and trying to take Caceres down. But then when they separate, Caceres is landing shots, landing kicks, throwing aggressive attacks and things like that. And I think that will give him the nod in the judges' eyes. So I'm going with Alex Caceres to win this fight, and I'm going to win via decision.
Yeah, it's crazy to think, man. Bruce Leroy's been in the UFC since 2011, 8
Madness.
years, 20 fights. Like, it really doesn't seem like that at all.
And he's only 31.
Exactly, the dude's got plenty of experience. But I'm actually going the opposite way in this fight. I think that Steven Peterson's style, the ugly type of dirty wrestling, grinding style, is the exact type of style that I think can cause Bruce Leroy some problems. If Steven Peterson stays sort of out at range, and he's at the end of the jabs and the kicks of Caceres, because Caceres will be the longer fighter in the cage, I think that he'll cause some problems. But ultimately, I see Caceres is a much worse version of Luis Pena. I don't mean any disrespect to Bruce Leroy when I say that. I just think Luis Pena is a young, surging fighter that he's good now and has got plenty of potential, you know. And I just think he's a better version of Bruce Leroy in this fight. And although Peterson is really hittable, this is the one thing that I really don't like about him. He can't get a hit as much as what he did against Pena in this fight, because if he does, he's going to lose the fight again. He's got to be less hittable. But I do think everything that Peterson tried to do against Pena is 100% his style. It's 100% how he's comfortable fighting. And I just feel that everything he did against Pena will work a little bit better against Bruce Leroy. And for that reason, I do see him having a lot of success in this fight. I think it's going to go to the distance. So I've got Steven Peterson to win. I'm going to take him to win via decision. And in the next fight of the night, we've got Raquel Pennington versus Irene Aldana. John, who have you got?
Yeah, this is again another interesting matchup. Good stylistic fight. We've got another Rocky competing in Raquel Pennington. That's both of them on the card, and yeah, the last time I saw Raquel Pennington was the betting underdog in this fight, and I think it's going to be close. I mean, Aldana I've been impressed with so far. She's putting some good displays over Betcha Caceres, Lucy Pudilova, and Bernardo as well, and especially against Betcha Caceres, she looked really good. First round she was moving really well, she throws those 1-2s really well, and that fight with Pudilova as well was a fantastic fight. And I think if she wants to beat Pennington, she's got to be utilise a similar game plan to the Caceres fight. I think she's got to move. She's got to keep moving. She's got to throw the 1-2s and then get out of the way, because Raquel Pennington can spend a lot of time grinding against you on the fence and wearing you down and taking you down. And I know so far in her career, UFC career, Aldana's got a very good takedown defense percentage, but she's not come up against anyone like Pennington yet, who will try over and over again to land those takedowns. I think she had I think she did land a couple of takedowns on Jermaine Durandamy. She definitely landed a takedown on Amanda Nunes as well. Obviously, those two ladies are fantastic strikers, two of the best strikers you'll see throughout the female ranks. So it's quite hard to gauge where Pennington stands up against Aldana, and I'm actually going with a Rocky double in this one. I'm going with Raquel Pennington to win this fight. I think she will be able to. I think she'll be able to close the distance if Aldana's not careful. I think she'll be able to spend a lot of time. I think it's going to be a really ugly fight. I think she's going to spend a lot of time, like I said, just doing enough to stop the referee from separating them against the fence. And I think she's going to grind out a really, really scrappy decision, and a very close decision as well, because I do think Aldana will have some success moving and throwing the 1-2s, but I also think Pennington will have some success clinching and using that grinding style of hers. So I'm going with Rocky to win this fight via a very, very close decision.
Yeah, I'm going the other way again, man. I feel that if this is the Pennington that we saw, before the Amanda Nunes fight, which it absolutely could be. I do feel that she would beat Aldana relatively easily in this fight, but I've just got a sense that maybe Raquel's declining a bit. And, you know, you look at her last two losses, Amanda Nunes and Jermaine D. Randami, and I don't think they're bad losses by any stretch. You know, she went longer with Amanda Nunes than anyone else has got that's not called Valentina Shevchenko. And also with GDR, she was also a decent performance as well. So I just feel, though, that after those fights, I'm not sure how she's going to come back in this fight. But I am going to pick Aldana to win the fight. It was not as confident as I would have been before the Betchkoya fight, because I bet Aldana in that Betchkoya fight and she made me fucking sweat against Betchkoya, who is a terrible fighter. And I just really, you know, I don't think she possesses that many skills at all yet. I feel that she could have been beating Aldana on the scorecards until she got armbarred in round 3. It was actually a bit of a relief, and I didn't expect to have to feel that relief betting Aldana in a fight with Betchkoya. So that puts me off a little bit, but ultimately I do feel that if I am right and Raquel Pennington is declining a bit, I think the aggression, the volume, and the pace that Aldana can put on, I think will put Raquel Pennington out of her comfort zone, and I think she'll just start falling behind on some of the rounds. There is absolutely the case though where Pennington can tie up with Aldana and just grind her against the cage and win a decision via that method. Ultimately, I do think the fight does go to the scorecards. I just feel that activity and volume will be on the side of Aldana, and for that reason, I'm going to take Irene Aldana to win. I'm going to take her to win via decision. And in the next fight, one that I'm really looking forward to, we've got Sam Alvey versus Klidson Abreu. John, who have you got?
Yeah, I'm going to get my pick out the way really quickly in this one, because I want to hear the what the Alvey Whisperer has to say about this fight. I'm more looking forward to your breakdown than I am talking about it myself. But yeah, I think I haven't seen a great deal of Klidson Abreu. I wasn't overly impressed with him in that Ankalaev fight. I mean, Ankalaev smashed his nose up pretty badly early on in the fight. I know he's predominantly a submission guy. A lot of his wins come by submission. He prefers the fight when it's on the mat. He didn't seem overly active on the feet against Ankalaev, which is the key to victory against Sam Alvey. Sam Alvey nowadays is very much a tentative fighter. He fights on the back foot, back against the fence, and then will try and just swing one heavy bomb and knock you out. And obviously, last two fights he's suffered stoppage losses. He argued that the Jimmy Crute one was early, but having watched it back, I'm happy with the stoppage. He wasn't really trying to advance his position in any way, and Crute was landing shots on him. But yeah, this one's tough for me, but you know what? I'm tempted to go with Sam Alvey in this fight. He's got a very good takedown defense, so I think Abreu will struggle to take the fight to the mat. Abreu didn't really have a great output in his in the fights that I've seen of him, especially in the Ankalaev fight, the last fight. And Alvey does fight well going backwards. He is a good counter striker, so it wouldn't surprise me if he lands some shots. Obviously he can land on Abreu. We saw that in the Ankalaev fight, as I mentioned, with the broken nose as well. He does have some knockout losses on his record as well. Whether Alvey knocks him out, I don't know, but I am favouring Sam Alvey in this fight. I do think he'll have some success countering Abreu when he comes in. I think he'll be able to stuff the takedowns and keep the fight standing. And yeah, so I'm going with Sam Alvey to win this fight. I'm going to pick him to win via decision rather than knocking Abreu out. But you never know with Smiling Sam. He does pull these knockouts out of the bag every now and then. But yeah, I'm going with Sam Alvey to win this fight.
Yeah, it's funny because like someone a few fight cards back called me the Sam Alvey Whisperer, and which I found quite funny, and I rolled with it. The reason they did that is because the fights that I do eventually bet Sam Alvey in against, or just the fights that I bet of Sam Alvey, I've got 100% record, man. That's betting on him, that's betting against him, that's betting props, over under rounds, that sort of thing. So when I do bet a Sam Alvey fight, I've got 100% record, so I just found that pretty funny. But yeah, to this fight itself, It's actually quite an interesting one because Klidson Abreu is absolutely more of a grappler than he is a striker. You know, his grappling's so slick, it's so good. He's also, if you've not seen any tape of him, go and watch the fights where he scores the arm bars from posturing up in mount, so not going to his back. Fucking crazy stuff. He ends up pulling, hyperextending the elbow across his own thigh. It's nuts. I've never seen any other fighter do it, and he's done it a couple of times as well. It wasn't just a fluke. So the dude's a really good grappler, and this is actually where it gets quite interesting because, like you've already mentioned, John, Sam Alvey's got sort of fucking godlike defense. So I do think he could be declining a little bit in MMA. It's nothing drastic just yet, but I do think he is. But the one thing that I will put him up there with any fighter in the UFC is his takedown defense. And that's where it gets a little bit interesting because that's where Abreu really has his advantages, his major advantages in this fight. If he can get Sam Alvey on his back and settled, he'll roll all day long over Sam Alvey. Now, that then begs the question, well, what's Abreu striking like? And even though, there was a lot to be desired from Abreu in that fight with Ankalaev, I actually think Ankalaev is a potential future top 5 light heavyweight fighter. So I think the dude's really good, so I don't put too much stock into that. Also, Ankalaev made Abreu's nose look like a fucking clock face with all angles that was pointing. So, again, I just feel that Abreu went through some really tough shit in that fight, and on short notice as well. I felt a little bit sorry for him, but when you look at Sam Alvey on the feet, we know what to expect at this point. You're not going to get much movement, you're not going to get much volume, but you are going to get a good counter striker, and that's where Abreu's got to be careful. But I'm actually favouring Abreu in this fight. I like that, again, I mentioned it with Trinaldo earlier on. Klidson Abreu is a long-time student of Master Andrei Dida over Ella Vukau, and I feel that a lot of that striking that he's learned is from Master Andrei Dida, so he'll have took in a really good, solid Muay Thai and kickboxing game from all those years of tutorage from him. But now he's over at American Top Team as well. I just feel like he'll elevate his game just a little bit more. And if it does come down to a striking versus striking fight in this fight, I just feel that the movement's going to be there of Abreu. He's going to have time. He's going to be able to pick his shots because Alvey just doesn't put that pace or pressure on, and his movement is very minimal as well. I just feel that I could see Alvey landing a counter strike if Abreu gets a little bit overconfident and comes forward, lets his hands down, has a moment of a mental lapse, and Alvey does catch him and knock him out. That wouldn't surprise me at all, but I do feel that Abreu is going to have the advantage striking just purely because of movement and volume. And if he manages to get it to the mat, which I'm not totally convinced that he can yet, unless he does score a trip opposed to going in for your singles and doubles. If he can get it to the mat, it'll be an absolute wash on the mat with Abreu on top. So I am going to take Klidson Abreu to win. I do think the fight stays standing, and I do think Abreu follows a recent trend and knocks Sam Alvey out. So I'm going Klidson Abreu to win. I'm going to take him to win by knockout. And in the next fight of the card, we've got Roxanne Modafferi against Jennifer Maia. John, who have you got?
Yeah, another interesting stylistic matchup. Jennifer Maia, predominantly a striker. I think she's got a boxing background, and Roxanne Modafferi, she's more of a grappler. She does her best work on the mat. We saw that in the last fight against Antonina Shevchenko. She had some success against her with the wrestling exchanges and spending some time in top control and forcing that split decision victory. These two have fought before, back in Invicta back in 2016, a very close fight in which Jennifer Maia won by a split decision, and I also think this is going to go in the same vein. I think that Maia will edge the striking, I should expect. I think Modafferi will have moments in the fight where she has some top control, like we saw Alexis Davis did against Jennifer Maia. But ultimately, I think over the course of 3 rounds, again, spoiler going to a decision. Over the course of 3 rounds, I think that Maia's striking will outweigh the moments that Modafferi has in top control in the judges' eyes, and will sway the fight in the decision of Jennifer Maia. I wouldn't be surprised in the slightest if again it's another split decision, due to the fact I think it is going to be really close. I think it is going to be very fine margins between the two of them, but I'm going with Jennifer Maia to win this fight, and I think she'll win via decision.
Yeah, you've hit the nail on the head, and I think again it's another really good stylistic fight, because you are going to get Modafferi that he's not going to be able to hang on the feet with Jennifer Maia, and therefore will be looking to get the fight to the mat like she did with Antonina Shevchenko, and just likewise, Maia will have a lot of success on the feet, but I don't think she can hang with Modafferi on the mat. So it's almost whether Modafferi can get that fight to the mat and get it to the mat often. We saw with Jennifer Maia, though, she did struggle with Alexis Davis at times, trying to keep her off the mat. I think Davis did get 1 or 2 takedowns in that fight. But the key thing is when Davis took her down, she did stay on top of her for long periods. So that's a worry here, because I do feel that if Modafferi gets Maia down, she will also be able to stay on her for the remainder of that round. But I think the biggest gap in skill in this fight is going to be the striking. I do think Jennifer Maia is going to be the bigger woman inside the cage. I think she's going to be the stronger woman inside the cage. So unless Modafferi's shooting those reactive takedowns and really getting Maia down off balance, I think Maia can defend the takedowns, can use her strength to turn her in, exit and escape from the clinch, and then reset and go again. I think the fight is going to be won and lost via striking, and for that reason I favour Jennifer Maia. So I'm taking Jennifer Maia to win. I'm going to take her to win via decision. And in the next fight, we've got Ray Borg versus the newcomer Gabriel Silva. John, who have you got?
Yeah, another guy in Ray Borg who was robbed in his last fight. He definitely defeated Casey Kenny, in my opinion. I was very surprised when the results were read out, and he was given and the fight was given to Casey Kenny. Obviously, given the circumstances around Ray Borg and everything with his son as well outside of the octagon, it was pretty upsetting. And I think there was a video of him or a clip of him after the fight, maybe in the locker room. It might have been the next day. Obviously, heartbroken at the fact that he missed out on that win bonus, which obviously helped with that situation outside of the octagon. Because he for me really should have been given the nod in the judges' eyes. He's going up against the guy Gabriel Silva. I haven't really seen a great deal from him. I did see the highlights of his last. Well, wasn't even the highlights. It only lasted 1 minute and 23 seconds of his fight against Jake Heffernan in LFA, which he won via strikes. But the majority of his victories before that had come via decision. You're going back to back in 2013 when he got his next finish, besides that Heffernan fight. But I can never back anyone against Ray Borg, just due to the fact that his heavy wrestling style and how often he can take you down, and I know that Kenny did a good job of scrambling and getting back to his feet, and Silva may be the same. Silva may be able to get back to his feet, but Ray Borg takes you down so often that he has to keep scoring in the judges' eyes, and occasionally you may get the anomaly like the Kenny fight where the judges give it the other way. But a lot of the time, if you're constantly taking down your opponent, I think that you're going to be given the nod in the judges' eyes, and I think that's how this fight is going to play out. I think Ray Borg is going to land takedowns. I think Silva will get back to his feet. They'll exchange on the feet again, and I think Borg will take him down again. And even when Borg gets taken down, which you saw in the Kenny fight, he's got a good ability to get back to his feet himself, and he sweeps very well as well. But yeah, I'm going with Ray Borg to utilise his wrestling on his way to a decision victory in this fight.
Yeah, I love Ray Borg and I love his style. You know, I've said that for a long time. But I do question sort of where he's at right now, because obviously he had a lot of health issues at 125, and he pulled out of a couple of fights and he missed weight a few times as well. And then he goes up to 135 against Casey Kenny and he misses weight again, and apparently didn't really look that great during weight cut and stuff. Was really struggling. So I'm struggling to see where Ray Borg's at. And in Gabriel Silva, actually, is coming up against a really good fighter here. It's Eric Silva's younger brother, for those that don't know, and he's a good fighter. 24 years old, 8-0, fights out of Team Nogueira, BJJ black belt. And when you look at Ray Borg, so everything you've just said, John, is right about Ray Borg, but then you've got to think of how you beat Ray Borg, and the type of fighter that can beat Ray Borg relatively comfortably is a fighter that's got good, quick, hard, sharp hands inside the pocket, so really good boxing, and also a fighter that's a really good scrambler, because you're going to need that for when Borg gets on the inside and takes you down. And ironically, Gabriel Silva's got both of those abilities. Those are two of his greatest strengths. I'm telling you, he hits hard, like he hits fucking very hard for that weight. He's also used to fighting 145ers as well. It's sort of like 5'9", 5'10", who were much bigger than him, much bigger than Borg. So this is actually a fight where Silva's going to fight somebody sort of his own size. And his scrambling ability is really good as well when he gets taken down. Like I say, he's a BJJ black belt, but when he gets taken down, his sprawls are good, his scrambles are good. He doesn't settle on his back, and he's springing straight back up or looking for a sweep and reversal. Now, it's going to be a tough fight for Silva. This is his UFC debut. He's coming in against Ray Borg, who's got by far the biggest and the best experience in mixed martial arts. He's fought in the UFC for a long time now, and he's fought some of the best fighters as well. He's also got a style that's very dominant, so it is going to be tough for Gabriel Silva. But I think stylistically, I favour Gabriel Silva in this fight, and I also think the question marks that I've got on where Ray Borg is right now is also a factor, definitely, because we don't know what's going on in his head right now. We don't know where he's going to be out of his cut. We don't know if he's going to struggle with another weight cut and all these sort of things. So I think that Gabriel Silva is actually an exciting dude to go into the UFC. I think I think he's going to catch the eyes of a lot of people, win or lose. And I think he's going to be a name that we talk about after UFC San Antonio. So I think Gabriel Silva's going to win. I think Ray Borg's going to get caught with a 2 or 3 piece combination as he's coming in for a takedown. Like I say, Silva's got quick, sharp hands, and I actually think Silva's going to knock him out. So I'm taking Gabriel Silva to win. I'm going to take him to win via knockout. And in your next fight of the night, we've got Mario Batista against the returning Jin Soo Son. John, who have you got?
Yeah, that Jin Soo Son fight was against Petr Yan in his UFC debut was absolutely fantastic. And if there was any doubters as to his ability or what kind of level Jin Soo Son was at before he came into the UFC, I mean, he really showed in that fight that he's got heart, he's got good striking, he has the ability to get back to his feet. I think he got taken down in that fight, and he got back to his feet. He had some great exchanges as well with Petr Yan. He's a top level guy in this division, so I'm excited for the guy. Obviously he trains out of Korean Zombie MMA as well. Anyone who knows me knows I'm a massive Korean Zombie fan, so straight away I'm always going to be high on anyone who's associated with Korean Zombie. And I really like the look of Jin Soo Son. I mean, when Yan was hitting him with his hardest shots, he was literally smiling back at him. Nothing fazed him. So if anyone's thinking about putting any money on him losing via knockout, I don't think I'd fancy my chances of that. But he's going up against the guy Mario Batista, who we haven't seen a great deal of. Obviously another guy who's come from LFA and combat, but then he made his UFC debut against a tough guy himself in Corey Sandhagen. He lost in the first round via armbar. I did like that he threw quite a few nice combinations where he was mixing it with the leg kicks at the end of the combination. But from what I've seen of the two guys, I like Jin Soo Son in this fight. I think he's going to be the more aggressive guy. I think he's going to be marching forward. I don't think any of the combinations that Batista throws will phase him. And I think he's just going to outstrike him. I think he's just going to march him down. It's similar to the Petr Yan fight. They're just going to duke it out, or Jin Soo Son's going to be happy to duke it out. And I think he's just going to keep landing shots. And it wouldn't surprise me if the accumulation of strikes actually led to a stoppage either. But given the fact that Batista hasn't been stopped in his career via strikes, I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt for the sake of this pick, and I'm going to go with another decision. But I think this is going to be a really fun fight. I think it's going to be similar to that Petr Yan fight. I think it's going to be really entertaining. Lots of stand and bang, and I'm going with Jin Soo Son to win via decision.
Yeah, it was a pleasure being able to watch that fight back for this card with Jin Soo Son and Petr Yan. You know, it's such a fun fight. But I actually feel this fight favours Mario Batista because this is a southpaw versus orthodox fighter. Although Batista does fight in orthodox, sometimes he's a switch stance fighter. But the way you stop someone like Jin Soo Son coming forward with his power shots and being able to walk through strikes is by using kicks, and that was the first thing I looked for in Batista, and I needed to see how often he uses those kicks, because that's a huge weapon when you're fighting someone like Son. And actually, when Son was fighting Petr Yan, when Petr Yan was in the southpaw position, he was landing some hard shots on Petr Yan, and that's because he throws the straight shots, and the straight shots with an orthodox versus southpaw fighter tend to be quite effective. This is where I think Mario Batista, being a switch stance fighter, really favours him, because he can come out of that southpaw stance if he needs to make sure those straight shots aren't as effective. But the thing is with Batista is, in previous fights, his opponents have been able to walk through some of the shots, some of the kicks, and been able to land on him, and at that point he's very hittable. So this is where it becomes really interesting, because if Jin Soo Son can walk through them shots, walk through kicks, then he's going to be inside the boxing range countering. And once he's countering off the big actions from Batista, he's really going to be able to put on some good shots, some crisp shots and hard shots. So it'll be really interesting to see, A, if he can do that, and B, how Batista handles that inside the cage. But ultimately, I think Batista's really quite elusive, and with Son walking forward, I think Son believes in his durability a lot more than what he should, and for that reason I do think Son's quite hittable as well. Although we didn't see Petr Yan knock him out and hit him with some hard shots, it still isn't it's still not a possibility for Batista to land a hard head kick or a knee or a punch that gets through and actually knock Jin Soo Son out. I do think that's possible, and I do think that happens. I think he's going to land a big head kick that's going to wobble Jin Soo Son. It's going to put him in a little bit of trouble. He may not have been in that sort of position too many times before because he's durable. And I think Batista will jump on him and finish him. So I'm actually going to take Batista to win. And although he could knock him down and submit him, which is a possibility, I am going to take him to win via strike. So I'm going to take Mario Batista to win via knockout. And in the final fight of the podcast, we've got Domingo Pilate against Felipe Caceres. John, who have you got?
I'm looking forward to Domingo Pilate fighting here. Obviously, we saw him on Dana White's Contender Series back in 2018. About a year ago, fought Vince Morales, who's fought a couple of times in the UFC since, and he got the win in that fight with a rear naked choke. He showed some good durability in that fight as well. Obviously, Morales hurt him at the end of the first round, got him down to one knee against the fence, but Pilate showed real heart to see out the round and then come back in the second and really effectively take the back and lock on that nasty choke, which had Morales sprawling all over the place in a state of semi-consciousness. And he's going up against Felipe Caceres, who again is a guy that we've seen come from jungle fights. We saw him against Geraldo de Freitas in his UFC debut back in February. Wasn't overly impressed in that fight against de Freitas, so it'd be interesting to see what changes he's made and how he's looked back on that fight to make improvements for his Pilate fight. But I like Pilate in this fight. I like his aggression. I liked in the Morales fight. He wasn't afraid to stand and exchange, but then also showed that he does have a really nasty ground game as well. And I just think he's going to be able to mix it up really well in this fight against Caceres. And I do think he'll be able to have some success on the ground as well. But ultimately, I'm going with Domingo Pilate to win this fight, and I think he finishes Caceres as well.
Yeah, I agree, man. I like Domingo Pilate. I think he looks good, and he's very well rounded as well, which is key. You know, he's also really big for the division. Fights in a southpaw stance, so tends to be able to throw that kick to the open body and the inside of the leg, and obviously the open face when it's coming up high. Wasn't massively impressed with Felipe Caceres against de Freitas at all. I think he showed in some spots that he's got abilities, but Honestly, I expected more with him coming from Team Nogueira. Obviously, the development's still going to be there. He's still going to be able to improve from fight to fight, so that has to be taken into consideration. But I'm not sure where he beats Pilate in this fight, because I think Pilate is the better striker. I think he's going to land more volume. I think he's going to land the harder shots. And if this fight happens to hit the mat, I think Pilate will roll bottom or top as well. So I just think it's a really tough fight for Caceres. The only worry that I do have from Pilate is he has got that tall man's defense, which you spoke about earlier with James Vick, arcing backwards in a straight line and leaving your chin out to be hit. That's what we talk about when we mention tall man defense. So he has got that issue. That can always be a problem no matter who you fight. Like I say, MMA, 4-ounce gloves, anything can happen. But ultimately, I think Domingo Pilate is gonna have a lot of success in this fight. I can actually see him hurting Caceres with a body kick, or maybe catching him and dropping him with a straight shot down the pipe, straight left down the pipe, and jumping on a submission maybe. So again, just like I mentioned with the Batista fight, it's quite tough to actually be confident on if you are picking a finish, whether it is going to be a knockout or a submission. I'm going to jump on a submission for this fight. He's got 4 submission wins on his record. I think if he does hurt a fighter, if that fighter's not hurt too badly and they do end up on the back, I think he'll just jump in the guard, advance, and while still in a bit of a dazed state, be able to have a lot of success on the mat. So I'm going to take Pilate to win. I'm going to take him to win via submission. And that's it for this week's podcast, guys. So John, before we hit the Newsome MMA mentions, what do you need to mention, man?
Yeah, as always, just check out the Newsome MMA website, YouTube as well. The YouTube channel has loads of great stuff on there. I said it the other week, and unfortunately I've got to echo it. I've been pretty quiet recently with work and family commitments, but working really hard to get you some good content over the next couple of weeks. Hopefully, should have a really big interview with someone who will have welterweight title implications in the coming weeks as well. Fingers crossed on that one that we can get that one to work. So keep an eye out for that. And yeah, then always just hit me up on Twitter at MMA and me. Always happy to talk all things MMA with you guys. So hit me up at MMA and me, and let's chat.
Awesome. Now for the Newsome MMA mentions. First of all, I want to mention the Newsome MMA website. Don't forget to visit the outlet's website at newsomemma.co.uk, where you'll find the locally famous tape index feature, prediction videos, fighter interviews, the content collaboration with Heavy Duty Fight Management, and you can even request colour commentary and media coverage from Newsome MMA as well. The next mention is for MMA Play 365, which I spoke about at the start of this podcast. We had a great week last week. MMA Play 365 is perfect for any type of gambler, so whether you're in this game for the long term or whether you just want some fun bets whilst you're watching the fights on the night, the goal is to make money, and that's absolutely what we're going to be doing for you. So follow MMA Play 365 over on Twitter, Facebook and Instagram, or visit MMAplay365.com and subscribe today. And the final mention is for the long-term sponsor of Newsome MMA, CBD Life UK. CBD is an amazing product and something that I use myself. Thousands of professional athletes also use CBD too, and at CBD Life UK they've got a wide variety of products to suit the needs of any customer. You can go to cbdlifeuk.com and use promo code Newsome MMA to get 15% off your order. And that's it from us, guys. Enjoy the fights on Saturday night, and we'll see you next week.